living like a prince. Made the hammer go, crushing my heart to pieces. Never hold it, just leave it. Resurrect and believe it, just receive it. He could do a better job than you can make it. You can fake it, flip, twist and mold it, but you're still holding it. And if I knew I didn't have to force my future, baby, I would have been sleeping in.
Yo, okay, I want to talk about sadness and disappointment tonight. Wah, wah, wah. Like, right, like, okay, that's a great way to start off the night. But here's the thing, like, I'm not talking, like, I remember pretty far back in my, younger years, but I specifically remember when I was 5 years old, the first time like actually being sad. And it had to do with watching a movie. And my older cousins, I had a lot of cousins and a lot of them are older than I am. And they were watching a movie about a boy and his dog. And the movie, Disney movie, mind you, is Old Yeller. Now, all the old people look around in the room, they're going, oh my God. Like they know where I'm going with this. For you youngins, get ready. And I remember like it was called Old Yeller. It's about a boy and his dog and they became friends. They're out going through some crazy adventures. The dog and him are like besties. He gets him as a puppy. He grows up with them. He like saves them in the middle of the movie because there's always tension and something happens to the boy and the dog saves him and all these bad people and all this stuff. And then what happens is that at one point the dog saves the boy from a pack of rabid wolves. And they go home and it's like, oh, the music's like nice and cheery. And he gets home and the dog's hurt and then the dog gets healed. But then it remembers, or that something happens over the time, is that the rabid wolves gave rabies to his dog. And then the kid, I don't know why this happened, and this is a kid's movie, had to take his dog out from behind the shed because it wanted to kill him now because he was rabies. And he had to take the dog, his dog that he grew from a puppy, walked it through, saved his life, bestie, took him out behind the shed, and his parents made him shoot his dog. Oh my gosh. Kids movie, Old Yeller. Spoiler alert, that's what happens. You don't need to watch it because it literally is the saddest moment that I could remember watching a movie at 5 years old. So like, I was sad. I was like legitimately scarred for the rest of my life. Still am to this day. Like sad, but then also like disappointed now that I'm older and my older cousins for letting me watch this movie. And I specifically remember this moment because like sadness and like disappointment has such like weight in our lives that I can remember. I'm 36 years old, right? And I can remember back down to when I was 5 saying like there was this very sad moment for me of a kid's movie. Sad. Old Yeller. Don't watch it. Or do if you want. That's fine. But here's the thing. Sadness is such a heavy thing. Sadness and disappointment about just is like we've been talking about emotions within like how we feel as humans. Like it is a driver of how we react. And I still get like a little disappointed. I still get sad. And even though like I'm not an emotional person on the outside, I definitely feel sadness. I definitely feel disappointment. And we do, as humans normally do, that happens within our life. We get in these moments of sadness, moments of disappointment, whether it's through people who have made us sad or God had a situation that God has maybe seems like he's put us in, has made us sad, or God did not do something that's brought disappointment, or people have brought disappointment because they said or did something or did not do something. And it just kind of got me thinking with like all this sadness and Old Yeller and all these things, like, what do we do when we are sad? What do we do with this real emotion that we as human beings feel? Because if we're not careful, it could actually take a real weight upon our lives and actually affect on how we're doing and working and living out in that sadness. And like, have you ever been in a funk like that? Have you ever been in such a mode where like you can't get out of this feeling? Like you woke up and you're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like you just kind of like, you're sad about something. Something happened. Someone did something. Someone said something. You're disappointed and you're kind of, okay, God, what are you doing? And like, you just kind of wake up. You're like, I don't know how I feel, but I just feel heavy. You ever felt like that? Like I'm just heavy. And it kind of feels right here in the chest. And I don't know with how many people are listening. I don't know what you're going through. And maybe you're not in a season of sadness or disappointment now, but I'm letting you know it's probably going to come. And there's probably moments of that. But maybe something's happened in your life where you're just sad. Maybe you're heartbroken. Maybe like you're hurting in that moment, or maybe you're disappointed in a situation or a person or a being or God or whatever it is. And the thought is like, what do we do when we're feeling these heavy emotions? What do we do when we're sitting in this, like, I don't know how to get out of this feeling? Like, what do I even talk about? What do I even do in that? That sadness and disappointment, here's the thing, like we're talking about, like it's natural. It's natural for us to feel these things. They're like rain clouds in our lives, that just as rain is essential for growth, so are these emotions for our emotional growth and for our emotional maturity, and that they teach us empathy, resilience, the beauty of hope after the storm, right? That's what these feelings do. But however, there's a catch that if we don't learn how to manage these emotions, manage sadness and manage disappointment, they could actually turn into something much more destructive. And if they're unchecked, these emotions, they could actually lead to anxiety, they could lead to depression, and a host of other problems that come along with it that not just affect our mental health, but our physical well-being as well. And they could strain relationships, they could bring tension with people, bring tension with your relationship between you and God. They could hinder your performance academically, like in sports, physically. And it's literally like it could cloud your vision for the future of what's to come, because you cannot get out of this situation that you're feeling in this moment because of its heaviness. Like, I'm assuming a lot of you know what I'm talking about. Maybe some of you are even in that situation right now as I'm talking to you. But here's the good news, is that in the midst of our sadness, in the midst of our disappointment, that we have a consistent source of strength and comfort from Jesus. He's consistent. That our emotions go like this, ups and downs, but he's one of the most consistent things in our lives. And he knows what it's like to experience sorrow, sadness, disappointment. And that, in fact, the Bible tells us in Isaiah 53:3 that he was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with the deepest grief. So when we think like, okay, God doesn't know what I'm feeling, yes, he does. He knows exactly what you're feeling. That our God knows emotion because he created it. And since he created it, guess what? He can handle yours. And he can engage with it. And so listen, I want you to know this, because I think that if we could wrap up the whole thing, and we're going to be diving through Psalm 77, is that a feeling of deep sadness can lead to a deep relationship with God. That a feeling of deep sadness can lead to a deep relationship with God. See, I want you to think of a time where maybe like when God, or at least on some level, has let you down. Maybe you don't like a life circumstance. Maybe you don't like what's happening right now, and you can't get out of that funk. You have that rain cloud, the perpetual rain cloud just over your head, and you're just sad and disappointed. Maybe you prayed specifically for something to happen. You believed to your best of ability that God would do it, but he didn't. Maybe you felt close to him at one point, but now all of a sudden you don't. Maybe you know someone who used to be strong in their faith, and now they totally walked away from it, and you're not sure why, or why God would let that happen. Maybe you're just reading some things in the Bible that you don't seem to match up with what you actually believe, and they're wrestling with that. And man, there's just like a lot going on. Maybe there's something that someone did to you, said something to you, or whatever it is, that you just kind of are in this funk, and you're like, man, I'm just sad. I'm broken, and I don't know what to do to move forward. See, most of us get the idea, especially if you're growing up in the church, is that expressing disappointment with God is wrong. Okay, that's not true. It's not wrong. That we say that being sad about something God is doing, or that being sad about a situation because like God is, even though, yeah, he's in it, it's that's wrong. That maybe we get the sense that it would be disrespectful or selfish in how we're going about something, that because we're just thinking about me and my feelings, that will actually put God to the side in some way, that we actually learn lots of phrases to like sugarcoat how we're actually feeling in our disappointment and our sadness. Like, oh, God's got this. Yeah, I mean, that's true, but that's not helpful. Hey, God's good all the time. I mean, yeah, that's true, but it's like also not helpful. Have you ever been sad or disappointed and someone says that to you and you're like, I'm going to punch you in the face, right? Like, it's true, but it's also like, it's not helpful. And mostly we just learn, and this is the most deafening one, is that we just choose not to talk about it. We choose not to address the sadness, address the emotions or anything. But the Bible is actually full of people who like expressed emotions, who were honest with their emotions, especially to God, and especially in the book of Psalms. If you read the book of Psalms, it's like an emotional roller coaster. There's goods and there's bads and there's frustrations and there's praises and all those things, all of that. And today I want to look at Psalm 77, where the writer, whose name is Asaph, digs deep into how he actually feels about the situation that he's in and that God has put him in and let him be in. And he's experiencing some trials and he's sad and he's disappointed. And I want you to listen to how he talks about it and how he talks to God. Because here's the first thing as we dive into it is, and how do we process sadness? How do we process emotions and disappointment in whatever situation with God? Number one is this: be brutally honest with God. Be brutally honest with God. We've been talking about this. I hope you're catching a theme in all these things. It starts with, for he made the emotions, be brutally honest with how you're feeling. Because in Psalm 77, look at what it says, I cry out to God. Yes, I shout. Oh, that God would listen to me. When I was deep in trouble, I searched for the Lord. All night long I prayed with hands lifted towards heaven, but my soul was not comforted. Man, have you ever felt that? Do you feel that you've experienced that? And it says, I think of God and I moan, overwhelmed with the longing for his help. Basically saying, God, where the frick are you, God? Where are you? I don't see you. I don't know you. I don't feel you. I'm sad. I'm disappointed. I've searched for you. Nothing. Where are you? Like, can you sense his disappointment in this? Can you sense his sadness and grief in this? Like, look at verse 1. It says, like, what has he been doing? He's been crying out, even to God. But what does the second verse tell you? He says from his perspective that God is not listening to him. Why does he feel like God isn't listening to him? Because verse 2 tells us that when I was deep in trouble, I searched for the Lord. All night long I prayed with his hands lifted towards heaven, but my soul was not comforted. Again, Asaph is praying and reaching out to God, expecting God would bring him comfort in the form of relief in whatever his deep troubles were at that time that he's in. And it appears that God, even though he knows that his trouble is happening, that the power that he would do something about it, he is still not doing anything. Is God helping? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Probably, actually, in fact, that he can't just see it or he can't sense it, but Asaph has a sense that God is not helping. And he's crying out to God and being brutally honest, like, where are you? Where are you, dude? Like, where are you at? In verse 7, it says, has the Lord rejected me forever? Will he never again be kind to me? Is his unfailing love gone forever? Have his promises permanently failed? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he slammed the door upon his compassion? Like, these are real questions. He's not letting up on God. Where are you? What's happening? Of all these things not true. And he says, okay, Asaph, how do you really feel? Right? Like that's kind of when I'm reading, I'm like, how do you really feel about God in this moment? Rejected and unloved. And this is beyond feeling not listening to. This is sadness. This is straight up disappointment. In Psalm 77:10, it says, and I said, this is my fate. The Most High has turned his hand against me. So he's just going, God's left me. God's gone. I don't feel him. In his honest soul searching, Asaph let the waters of disappointment dig down into the depths of how he feels, that God has not just listened to him, but he has not loved him, and he's actually turned against him. See, here's the thing. Being honest is the first step into going into a deep relationship with God. That being honest, you have to first be honest in order to go deeper with God. And this is Asaph's reality, is that where he's really at, he's being brutally honest with where he is and how he's feeling, and he's giving it to a God who could take it. The second thing is this, is that if we want to process sadness and disappointment, not only do we have to be brutally honest, but we have to remember God's faithfulness. That we could feel all the feelings, but it's a great thing when we could remember what God has already done. Because look what it says, when it gets down to into the depths, look at what he says. He said, here's what happens. Psalm 77, verse 11. It says, but then I recall all that you have done, O Lord. I remember your wonderful deeds of long ago. They are consistently in my thoughts. I cannot stop thinking about your mighty works, O God, that your ways are holy. Is there any God as mighty as you, that you are the God of great wonders? You demonstrate your awesome power among the nations. By your strong arm, you redeemed your people and descendants of Jacob's and Joseph. See, the psalmist, what he's doing, he's like, hey, I might be feeling sad and disappointed in this moment. But God, I remember what you've done in the past. I remember what I've heard about you. I remember what I've done, what you've done for me. I remember what you've done to my people. You have proven over and over and over again that you have been faithful in the past, and that even though my feelings are that you're not here now, I'm going to believe that you're going to continue to be faithful in the future. It's part of getting out of the bucket of emotions and sadness and disappointment is remembering in the past what God has done. Because we're so focused on this that we tend to not focus on the past. And when we get out of that mindset that sticks us into where we are now that we can't get out of, and we remember what God has done, it helps us like, okay, God, you are faithful. You are good. You haven't really left me because you didn't leave me then. And actually can look back and look at you now and put that into my situation at the moment. That one of the best things that we could do to grow deeper in our relationship with God is to remember what God has already done in your life. That I bet if you were to look right now, right, just take a moment. If you were to look back at your life, you could begin to pinpoint where God has shown up in your life in the past. And you could be sure that he's going to be showing up now. That whether you feel it or not, in the midst of the sadness, in the midst of the disappointment, whether you feel it, God is working and he is moving, because he is always working and he is always moving, whether we feel it or we don't. That throughout the psalm that there's this underlying message that God's character remains the same. Even though our emotions are crazy, ups and downs, God's character is constantly the same. And he is faithful. He is holy. He is great. He's unchanging. And even in the facing of our doubts and disappointment, God's remained steadfast and reliable. Because in verse 15, it says, by your strong arm, you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. See, Asaph is speaking specifically about a specific incident in this moment where it appeared that God was going to disappoint people, where he's left them out to dry, but he came through in a greater way than he could ever imagine. That after hundreds of years of slavery in Egypt, God's people left Egypt and they were fleeing from Pharaoh and they were backed up against the Red Sea, and it seemed like God was not there. And this is what he's talking about in this moment. So that there was a desperate situation that they were up against, a body of water with no boats, Pharaoh's army coming down deep after them, chasing after them. And can you imagine their disappointment? Can you imagine the frustration and imagine the disappointment? God, you told us to leave and I left and now we're here and I got nowhere to go. And it felt like God had abandoned them, and that you could imagine what they've been thinking. What in this world, God, how can you do us dirty like that? And here's the thing, number 3, that I want you to remember, that we have to believe in these moments, that we believe that God always delivers. Not sometimes delivers, not partially delivers, but God always delivers. I know that what some of you are going to say, Justin, you have to say that. You work for the church. Right? Like, you have to believe those things. And I'm going to say, I don't always believe those things. I'm in situations and stuff in my own life where I'm like, God, where are you, dude? Like, what? Like, am I talking to somebody? Like, who am I talking to? Because I don't feel you. I don't see it. But here's the thing. All of these things, we could look at my experience, and you could probably look back at your own life, that God has always delivered. It may not look exactly how you thought it should look, but God still moved and he delivered on his promises. Because when I look back, that's exactly what he does. Because look what Asaph recalls. When the Red Sea saw you, O God, its waters looked and it trembled. The sea quaked to its very depths. The clouds poured out the rain. Thunder rumbled in the sky. Your arrows of lightning flashed. The thunder roared from the whirlwind and the lighting up of the world. And the world trembled and shook. And your road led us through the sea, your pathway through the mighty waters, and a pathway that no one knew that was there. See, here is the thing, that it looked different. God delivered for them. They had no idea that God was going to open up the Red Sea and let them walk through. You have no idea what God's going to do in your life. You have no idea how God's going to answer. You have no idea how God's going to deliver. But here's the thing, he always does. It may not look how you thought it would be. Because when I look at this story and what Asaph is referring to, he's remembering what God has done. He's realized what God has delivered. And he's going, okay, he's coming to terms with this sadness and disappointment and saying, okay, I might feel this way, but my God could do this. My God could bring me out of it. And so the question is this: what do you do with that? What do you do with that? Will you avoid it? Will you just sulk in it? Will you refuse to move out of it? Because let's be honest with you, some of you like attention, and some of you like being sad because people are like, oh my gosh, how are you? Are you feeling okay? And you like it, but that's not where God's calling you to stay. So what are you going to do with it? What are you supposed to say? Where are you supposed to go? Are we going to keep it at this surface level, not be real and dive deep into the emotions of sadness and disappointment? Or are you going to be honest? Are you going to be honest and real with it? Will you get alone with God and go through the soul-searching process, diving deeper into your relationship and be honest with him? Brutally honest with him. Will you follow Asaph's layout of Psalm 77, of being honest, of looking back and remember where he's faithful and believing that God will deliver better than you ever thought in your life? It may not feel like he's helping, but I know for so many stories in the Bible, and not only in my own life, that people around us that we could pinpoint, okay, God has delivered and he's been through. Like, this is not even in my notes because it happened this weekend, okay? I've seen this in my life. Okay, I've talked a little bit about like my family, 5 or 7 years ago, my parents split up. As a 30-year-old, that's still hard. My mom's an alcoholic. My dad started dabbling into that as well. Because of all the family drama that goes into it, I didn't talk to my brother for over 3 years. Not by my choice. My sister moved away because she didn't want to deal. I was in a deep sadness about the situation that I was in. And I'm just going like, God, I'm in ministry. I work for you. What is happening right now? My mom used to work at the church. My dad was a Christian. My brother used to, what is happening? And I was just I was sitting with my wife, I remember, and just going I'm the saddest I've ever been. And it sucks, right? You don't know what to do. And I remember reading this, Psalm 77, and coming up with this, and I was just honest, God, this sucks, God. I hate this. This is the worst. I wish that my family even pretended like everything was okay. I was going to be fine with that. But I was God, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be Jesus to my family in this moment. It's hard. I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to try to bring everybody together and love everybody the way that they're supposed to be loved, that you're calling me to love. That sucks. I hate it. So I was honest. But then I remember all the different areas of my life, and I look back and I said, God, you've been faithful here. You've been faithful here. You've been faithful here. You've been faithful here. And I go, okay, God, I don't know what you're doing, but you're going to continue to be faithful. And guys, I'm telling you, this last weekend was the first time that my mom, my brother, my sister were all in one place at one time to celebrate my mom's birthday. And it was great. It wasn't perfect, but it was great. And this is a prayer that I've been praying for years. And God is faithful. And he is good. And he is reliable. And so I want to challenge you, as I've experienced on myself, is that a feeling of deep sadness can lead to a deep relationship with God. Because I could tell you and look at you in the face in this camera and say, you know what? I've dove in deep into this sadness, but it's made my relationship with God that much stronger because I've seen him in action in my own life. And so for you, as we kind of wrap up our time, I just want us just to take a few moments just to sit silently, awkwardly silent with everybody, and just ask God, what's one way you felt disappointed or let down, either by God or by people, and just sit in that for a second. Be honest with him, okay? Just sit right now. Because the truth is, he could handle it. Let me pray for you. God, if we're being honest, that there's times when all of us wonder and question if you're really there and if you really love us and if you're really working. And I know that you have the power, all the power in the universe, that you care so deeply for every single one of us listening, That there's so many times when we experience in our experiences that don't seem to match up with what we actually believe or what you're doing. But God, help us be honest with you. Help us trust you. Help us so that we can handle our emotions and our sadness and our disappointment. That we could be brutally honest with you and that you could take it. Help us do the soul searching that's needed into that deeper relationship with you. God, I pray that anyone if we're stuck in that sadness, if we're stuck in that disappointment, that we get rid of any false expectations of you, that we replace them with what we know to be true about you and your character, that who you really are. And I thank you that you are good and that your love is absolutely unfailing and that you will never, ever in the end let us down. God, we pray this in your name. Amen.
What is up, SCY? If you enjoyed this video, if it blessed you, if you got something good out of it, I would love it if you commented, shared it with a friend, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Hit that button right there and follow along with us as we continue to bring sermons and messages for you guys. Love you, SCY. Peace.